Hi everyone, this is a quick review of our Lesson 1 for first year string players. This video is for students who are playing the cello. If you play violin or viola, there is a separate video for you, so you can click out of this and find that one. That will have information that is more relevant to you. But if you are a cello player, then you are in the right place. I hope that this will serve as a tool to help students remember some of the important things we went over in our lesson and to help with practicing throughout the week. And I also think this will be a good thing to help to keep parents up to speed about what we are doing in our lessons. So the first thing that we did was we went over a few basic instrument care pieces of information. The first thing is that these instruments are made out of wood, and because of that, it's very important that we keep them at a room temperature for as often as possible. So it's really important to just think about where your cello is. Don't keep it in a place that's very cold. Don't keep it in a place that's very hot. Generally, it's a good idea to store it in a bedroom or a living room, somewhere where we feel comfortable with the temperature. Normally, if we're cold, it means the instrument is also in a place that's too cold. So basements are not a good place to keep your instrument. On the porch is not a good place to keep your instrument. Near a furnace or a fireplace is not a good place to keep your instrument. So I would just think of a nice room temperature place to store your instrument. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to email me about that. The other thing is that we talked about had to do with these pegs up here. And these pegs are how we tune our instrument. And sometimes, especially with cello, because of the type of case they're carried in, sometimes these pegs get hit and they slip and the string gets very loose. That's a relatively common thing that happens. And typically it's at no fault to the student. It just happens sometimes. But oftentimes students will try to fix this themselves by turning the pegs. Now, it's something that I can do very easily, but for a student who has never done it before, they could turn the pegs too far and that will cause the string to snap. So I ask students to, if they're in that situation where the string is too loose, to just pack it back up and bring it to me to take care of. If that string snaps, then we have the expense of replacing the string, and cello strings are relatively expensive. So I would just ask that we're really careful with that. You can bring it into me at any time, even if it's not your lesson day, and I'll be happy to fix that for you. So let's get on to some playing things. The first thing that we worked on in our lesson was how to hold the cello properly. So I have mine set up right now, but I'm actually going to unset it up so we can do this together. If you're a student with your cello out, we can actually practice this together at the same time. So down here we have what's called the end pin, and this can be adjusted depending on your size and the size chair that you're sitting on. It's very important before you do anything that you scooch all the way to the edge of your chair and that your feet are flat on the floor and about a shoulder width apart. People like to try to play cello with their toes back, with their feet in all sorts of positions, and it really does not work unless you have your feet flat on the floor and you're scooched all the way to the edge of your chair. So you're going to loosen that the screw on the end pin and pull it out. Now this is the part where you have to kind of experiment a little bit and to find the length that's right for you. Once you find it, probably in a couple weeks, you'll know exactly how long you like to have the end pin. But for right now, you might have to experiment a few times to find the perfect length. So set it out to a length and tighten that screw. And what we're looking for, this is called the C peg, the one that's lower. We're coming over to your left side, and the goal is to have that C peg tickle your left ear. So we're looking for it to brush the bottom of your left ear. So I'm going to set my cello down here, and I actually on the first try got it. So this C peg is right next to my left ear. If your cello, maybe, I'm just going to hold it up to show you. If it looks like that, it's probably too high. If it looks like that, it's too low. So we want to set it so that C peg is right near your left ear. My cello is not turned any sort of weird direction. It's actually just going straight in the direction that I'm facing. That's how you know that your cello is set up the correct way. And many of you, if you rented, you probably got a cello strap to go on the floor. If you borrowed from me, I did not give out cello straps yet. I'm working on getting enough for everybody, but for right now, it would be best to practice in a place with carpet so that your end pin does not slide. Once I get the cello straps, those go on the bottom of your chair and you can practice anywhere. But for right now, carpet would probably be the best place to practice. So we're all set up with our instrument, and the next thing that we worked on was playing plucking some of the strings. Now you notice we're not using the bow yet, and that's something that we'll work on in maybe like our 4th or 5th lesson. It depends. It's a little bit different every year, but generally around lesson 4 or 5 we start using the bow. I ask that students not take the bow out at home, because if they're just playing along by themselves at home, they might develop some bad habits, and holding the bow, there's a very specific technique to that, and that's why we're going to wait to go over it in a few weeks. So I appreciate everyone's cooperation and patience in that. The other thing that goes along with the cello is that since the cases are soft and the bow is stored on the outside, be really careful not to just throw the case off to the side with that bow in there. Someone could come and step on it and it could snap in half. So that's just another thing to be careful of as you're playing this week. But back to the plucking, to the pizzicato, which is the fancy word for it. We're going to take our right hand and make an L. Your thumb is going to be anchored against this black piece right here. Is called the fingerboard, and you're going to anchor it against the fingerboard right around here. So we're not going to be up here. We're actually really sliding our hand down closer to the end of the fingerboard. That's where we're going to want to pluck. I'm going to keep it up like this just so you can see. Our index finger is going to be the one that grabs the string and plucks it. And I've never seen someone break a string from plucking, so don't be nervous that you're going to pluck it too hard and break it. For cello, you do need to put a little oomph into it to get a really good sound out. So we're going to do that together now. Make your L. Anchor that thumb on the fingerboard. I know you can't see mine, but I just showed you, and you have yours in front of you. We're going to use that index finger. We're going to pluck from the lowest string to the highest string. So we have C, G, D, and A. So again, that's C, G, D, and A. If you're practicing with me right now, this would be a good time to pause the video and go through those open string names. Make sure that you can say them forwards and backwards. It's really important that you know that you can just find a string like that you're like, oh, this is G or this is A. Very important to know that. So that would be a good goal for this week, is to memorize those string names. Now we're going to go to our homework, which was page 4 in the lesson book. If you don't have a lesson book yet, I've provided students with photocopies to practice from this week. And our homework was page 4, numbers 1 through 4. So right now I'm looking at number 1, called D and A March. And if you're following along with me right now, just take a second to point at the very first note of number 1. And that very first note of number 1 is called D. And that is the same note or the same pitch as your open D string, the one right here. Okay? As you can see in the music, it says that we're going to play 4 Ds. And then after those 4 Ds, the next note is a little bit higher on the staff. That note is called A, and that is your open A string. So all of the homework for this week is just using those notes D and A. And what we did in our lesson is we went through number 1 and we read those notes in rhythm to practice what they might sound like and to practice reading the note names. We also found that the symbol in there called a rest, and if you're a student, you can maybe even show your parents what a rest looks like. A rest is a musical stop. It means that we stop for one beat and do not play. So let's go through number 1 and read the note names and the rest. So here we go. D, 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 A, 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 D, D, A, A, D, 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 rest. A, 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 D, 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 A, 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 D, 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 rest. Next, we combined everything that we've worked on so far in this lesson. So we had our perfect posture holding our cello. We got our pizzicato ready. Anchor that right thumb, Get that pointer finger ready. Actually set it down on the D string, and we're going to go through and play all the notes for number 1. You can play it together with me right now. I'm going to play and say the note names, but don't feel like you have to do that. It's a lot harder to play and speak. So I'll do that, but you just focus on getting the notes. So here is number 1. Here we go. D, 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 A, 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 D, D, A, A, D, 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 rest. A, 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 So that's number 1. Your job this week is to be able to play through numbers 1 through 4, feeling really confident on them. You should sound solid just like that. You should be able to go all the way through without having to stop. Everyone filled out a practice log this week, and that's something that we will do at each lesson. The practice log lists the homework, and it also gives you a spot to log your practice sessions. I ask that everyone practice 4 times in between each lesson, and generally a practice session will be between 15 and 20 minutes, but our homework this week is a little bit lighter than usual. So for this week, maybe 10 minutes per session. And if you bring back that practice sheet to me next week and you have all 4 days recorded on there, you will earn a sticker, and we use those stickers to earn all sorts of cool things throughout this year. So that's a little bit of a look at what we did in our first lesson. I hope this was helpful. Take some time and go through numbers 1 through 4, and I'll be back next week with an update from lesson number 2.